So welcome everyone to Conversations again. I hope you all had time to look at our website, iehorizons.com, iehorizons.ca as well. And all our episodes on Conversations are available on YouTube as well. So do take a moment to look at the website, and you can also look at the YouTube videos on Conversations. So in the past few episodes, we have spoken to Dr. Kannan about anxiety and certain mental health issues. And today as well, we are talking to her about grief and how to cope with grief. Dr. Kannan's mission is to empower minds with proven evidence-based psychological tools. She's a psychologist at Powerful Insights Psychologist in Vancouver, British Columbia. And she excels in tailoring holistic plans specifically designed to address unique life situations and guides you towards a transformative and a positive journey. So let's speak with Dr. Kannan and learn from her what she has to say about grief and how to cope with grief. These are difficult situations for all of us in our lives. So hello, Dr. Priya. How are you doing today?
I'm good, Kamal. And how about you?
I'm okay. Thank you for making it again, and for our coming this topic today. It's very deep, and we discussed about it before as well. So looking for a lot of information, insights for many people, and these times have been difficult after COVID, through COVID. There has been a lot of grief in the environment. That's what I feel. It has kind of overloaded. It takes a while to even accept our loved one has gone. And like I would say, talk about my own self. When I lost my father, he was in coma for a few days. I mean, I saw that, and then a relative was kind of sending him some distant healing, and he was visiting him in the ICU as well. And I was praying, but I couldn't believe, for a long time that he is gone. Once he was gone, he was gone. But and I couldn't bear to watch my mother console my mother, my younger nephew who was very close to him. And the level of understanding is so different between the two different age groups. And so how does, this grief overall impact us, and why does it impact some more and some in more than others? Some people are strong enough. We say he's a strong person.
That's a wonderful question. And yeah, thank you for sharing. I know we had a little chat. As you know, I also recently experienced a loss of someone very, very close to me. And I think, as we are kind of talking about life situations and conversations, this isn't, grief or losing someone close to us is not something that any one of us can escape, right? It's a life situation we are going to encounter. And however well prepared we may be, we may be a psychologist, we may be a spiritual therapist, we may be somebody who thinks, they're the strongest person on earth. And it's not really about strength, and I'll talk about that, but it does and will impact each one of us. And it will impact each one of us differently for different reasons. So, the impact, the severity, the intensity, the duration of that impact will vary, but everyone will get impacted. And we get impacted in various different levels. And that's why we feel this so deeply, as you mentioned, because this is something that impacts us at, of course, the most obvious is the emotional level. So we go through, the various emotions of sadness, of feeling alone, feeling helpless. We go through the emotions of maybe guilt, of regret. We go through the emotions of anger at times, anger at ourselves, maybe anger at that person, even, and anger maybe at other people. We go through anxiety, and again, the anxiety may be related to other people and other people passing away, knowing that that is one thing certain in our life. It may be related to ourselves. So, yeah, it really does impact us so deeply at the emotional level, but it doesn't stop there, right? It impacts us also at the intellectual level or the cognitive level. We often find, especially in the immediate aftermath, we find ourselves suddenly being pulled into flashbacks, of times we spent with them. Your mind goes over them again and again in a way of holding on to that memory. Um, we might find ourselves not able to concentrate, having sleep disruptions, having dreams. So again, very deep at the cognitive level. We also get impacted at the physiological level because the pain that we feel, our body and mind are so connected, we can feel a range of physiological symptoms. So, it may be right from just feeling shock or, tingling in your nerves. It may be heart palpitations. It may be feeling breathless, dizzy, in the immediate aftermath, especially. But for some people, that may actually linger for quite a while. We may have, gastrointestinal symptoms, loss of appetite. We don't feel like eating. We may not feel like, we are able to digest food very well. So the whole tract of gastrointestinal symptoms there, headaches, migraines. So it just shakes our whole being. And spiritually, too, we often find that times of grief, we, sometimes doubt, sometimes question, sometimes, we even argue with, that higher self, if you believe in that. Uh, or we might just feel that sense of hopelessness. What is existence about? And all of these, the reason I spell it out is all of these are very, very natural and normal reactions or impacts of grief, of losing somebody. Um, Typically, within the first 2 weeks, they are pretty intense. And that's why you'll often notice that, cultures across the world, they have rituals for those first week or, the first 2 weeks to help the individual through, or the group, the family, through that process. But even if it isn't somebody who we've known so well, there is something that we experience as just being part of the same race, right? And the more we can identify with the person, the more it impacts us. So, why does it impact people differently? Often depends on factors such as how well you've known the person. What is your relationship to the person? What is, the circumstances surrounding how they passed? Was it expected? Was it unexpected? Was it something that, people were preparing for? They were preparing for? Was it sudden? What was their age? So a lot of things stir up what we call as your internal perceptions. We call them schemas, but internal perception of the world. When we wake up every day, even though at an existential level, we know we are finite, when we wake up every day, that's not how our nervous system goes about our day, right? We expect to wake up every day. We expect to see the same people around us. We expect to see the world just as we saw it yesterday when we went to bed. And that's important because if we didn't have that, we wouldn't really be able to, you know, fall asleep. So those boundaries are important. But having said that, each person has their own personality or their own ways of perceiving life and death. What does that really mean? So, again, our understanding, our internal schemas of the world, of ourselves, of what it means to be on this earth and what happens at that end point, all influence again how we are impacted. Of course, the age of the person influences their way of constructing that, because all of us have to create some way for our brain and nervous system to be able to assimilate that something we expected, somebody we expected to be here, is no longer here.
Yeah.
And our life after that, that's another big piece. Like, how much does that get impacted, right? The impact is much greater if the life gets impacted to a great extent, like a significant other, maybe a significant caregiver, or somebody you're a significant caregiver to, right? So the proximity, the time, the frequency, all of that does influence how it impacts us. So I do want to say it doesn't mean somebody is stronger or weaker. It just means that our nervous system sometimes needs a little longer time because we may be having a lot more on our plate than other people do. And it's important to be compassionate with ourselves or with somebody else if we feel like they aren't moving along, right? Oftentimes we find family members sometimes get frustrated if one person is taking longer. But it's important to realize that we are here with, our bodies, our nervous systems have an inherent resiliency system, but it's different for each person. And again, your cultural beliefs, whether you've been exposed to this before, helps the nervous system know what to do in a case like this, or maybe not. Maybe this is the first time you've encountered that feeling of something, somebody, the world, the future I expected is now suddenly shifted. So it's certainly something that impacts us at a very, very deep level, in fact, at all levels of our existence. And it does impact us differently because each one of us are unique and we have our own journeys. And based on when and where we encounter that, it touches us or moves us that much more deeply.
Yeah, yeah. Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. When I lost my father, my son was very young. He was just a few months old. I had my responsibilities to take care of. I didn't have enough time to even grieve, to be honest.
Right.
I did participate in all the rituals that was whatever that needed to be done. And later on, for my mother, my children were grown ups, and but her situation was so grim that, and there was a sense of this thing that okay, she's at peace, she's not in pain. That is what helped me quite a lot. And for my father, I couldn't. I was involved in spiritual practices. I did a lot of prayers, and sat down for my meditations, and that helped me a little bit. But yet I was trying to understand what's, he was there and he is gone now. So then does grief trigger anxiety or past trauma? Because um, I remember, we don't know our past lives, but definitely during our childhood and as we have grown, we have seen, we know of close people, close relatives leaving the world, friends for that matter. I remember we were very close to some friends in my college and they left. And it was hard to believe, like we were just buddies, every day hitting and banging and saying hello. And then we learned that, oh, this person is no more.
Yeah.
So, what can be considered normal, and when should we kind of seek help? I've never gone for help, but I've kind of overcome it through my maybe prayer or silence.
Yeah. No, absolutely. And again, you highlighted some very important factors that And you notice how much of this is our perception, right? Our perception of the circumstances. How is that, the deceased person, like how are they making their journey? Is there a journey, right? There are so many questions. And the answers that we give ourselves often bring that sense of peace and solace, or can keep us, feeling raw, and inhibit that healing process. You asked earlier, does it, trigger anxiety and past trauma? And yes, you're right. Our brain is like a computer, right? And the moment that there is one experience, it triggers a range of similar experience. All the memories get lighted up of past experiences. As you were talking about your father, you remembered your friend, you remembered other people. And the brain tries to gain from those exposures learning. So as you progress, it never will reach a point where you feel nothing, and that's healthy. But the resiliency, the practice of coping, the practice of techniques and strategies, right? The first time it's shock, and then slowly your nervous system is learning. It's like an AI. It learns from your experiences, your reactions, other people's experiences that, okay, for you, you found going into your spiritual practice helped you find that solace. For somebody else, it may be, talking, sharing, maybe, creating a monument for that person. So we find and seek different ways that we can stay connected in some form to that person, to that memory, especially if we are very close to them. And that's very healthy too. There are parameters in terms of when does this become unhealthy, but to answer your first question, that yeah, having some amount of anxiety, pop up, especially in that first 2 to 4 weeks, is really normal. And even if you feel nothing in the first 2 weeks or so, some people go into shock or numbness where, there is this feeling of almost depersonalization or derealization, which means that you see things and people walking around you, and it all feels very distant, as if you're watching a movie, right? And that's normal too, because your nervous system at some point found that that's the only way it could tolerate that distress or pain, right? Your nervous system's job is to preserve and protect you. So let it do its job, stay and, allow the different emotions to come into your awareness and experience them. But knowing that, and the first time it's difficult because you haven't gone through it, but as you go through that process, and you know that it will go through different stages. There are different theories on what are the stages of grief, what is healthy recovery. I won't go into the theoretical aspects, but roughly speaking, the first phase is usually always shock, right? And then when you come out of the shock, and that could be the space of emotional numbing too, or it could be the phase of emotional reactivity, what we call abreaction. So you might see someone is, uncontrollably crying or um, uncontrollably angry. Sometimes that's the way our grief comes out. Um, and all of that, again, like I said, is a part of the natural healing process. As we progress, and again, some emotions get dealt with or processed easier based again on, how you felt as a person, right? So uh, the anxiety for many people is, especially if this wasn't expected, and it throws off that expectation that we go to bed with every day, that keeps our anxiety at bay, that when we wake up tomorrow, things will be the same as they were people will be the same as they were when we went to bed. But when something like this happens, that gets shaken, and there is always an anxiety or a fear of, you know, wow, what can happen next? Will this person be there? Will I be there? And again, in that initial phase, these are normal reactions. And it may be difficult to see a loved one go through them. And we'll talk about strategies, but knowing sometimes that this is the way that we are designed, our bodies and nervous system cope with something so difficult helps us to say, this too shall pass, right? And that's often an anchor that you can hold on to. As often said, time will heal, but there are strategies that can help time heal more completely. Um, as you mentioned, if you are rushed to grieve, sometimes, yes, you don't have that opportunity, especially when it's, let's say, someone taking their life unexpectedly, someone, passes in an accident, or, any kind of different circumstances. It often doesn't leave you with the opportunity to really mourn and process through the anger, through the sadness, through the grief. And part of it, I think, is really also that people don't have that understanding of that grief or grieving. And some of what I've talked about are normal and important phases of grieving, right? So we try to suppress it, or we get anxious about just seeing those reactions in us or somebody else. And that's really sometimes what uh, slows down or inhibits the healthy grieving process. I work with clients, and there is something now that they are actually looking at as a diagnosis, uh, which broad levels is called pathological grief, which means that you know person continues to mourn the loss, or they're not able to progress with everyday activities. They're not, we often say they're not back to themselves,
Yeah.
which means that, either they're isolating or they're not able to function well, even after those initial 4 weeks. And that's a good sign to, seek support. Or if there is still some emotion that you're stuck with, for example, guilt. You keep ruminating on, I should have done this, or I should have done that, and I wish I had done this, and you keep beating yourself up about it. That's a sign that maybe there is something deeper, and you might need someone to just help you a little bit along that path to put you back on the track of natural or normal healing process. So again, since this is something that we know at a very deep existential level uh, is a certainty, we do have an inbuilt ability to cope with it. But yes, seeking support, professional support, often helps that journey from pain to peace more, let's say, smooth.
Yeah, you know what? I want to talk about my friend. I lost a very close friend of mine last year.
Mm,
She was in hospice, and I couldn't visit her.
right.
I didn't get to know actually for I think she was in hospice for about a month and a half or more, and
Right.
I got to know really towards her last few days. And then I lost a cousin, a little over a month ago, and this put me in shock. Actually, he was my first cousin, and just about a few years ago, I met him, and I would speak to him over the phone quite often. I knew he's old, and I was concerned, and but I couldn't go for his funeral because of my own health. And another thing that I tried to hide from my own self, but I'm sharing with you, is that I didn't know how will I, support my nieces, because they're a little younger to me. My cousin was very, very old and much elder, but we were close. And for a month or so, like I couldn't cope with it. I didn't realize what's going on, and I couldn't function normally. Most of the time I was in prayer, reading about life and death, what happens, all the spiritual aspects of it. And it's only a week ago, I started getting back to my normal self, kind of. But it weighed a lot on my mind, and so one cannot express or define,
Right.
what it is and what kind of pain, or is it anxiety? Did I cry? Did I sob too much? A little, yes, but not. But I couldn't. My children, I can't share it with them. They are too young to understand that part of it. And staying in a different part of the world, you don't have many family members around. In fact, in my case, I don't have family around other than my own children. So it is like, how does one explain, how does one process grief? Is there such a thing as healthy grieving? What can we do to help ourselves through that time, those moments? Like, it took me more than a month.
Yeah, and everything you say is so valid. And maybe I'll just go through some of the stages of grieving that helps us kind of look at where we are at a certain point in time. But I really want to acknowledge what you said about that feeling of isolation. Nowadays, where we are born in one place, we do our education, we work somewhere else, and finally we are somewhere else during our last days, or uh, it is very, very uh, tricky, I guess, to really be there the way we want for others. And we might find ourselves, like you said, not having necessarily that closure, that whole ritual or the rites of a funeral or a cremation or whatever faith someone follows is meant to provide the nervous system with a certain level of closure. And what you're saying is when you don't have that closure, that process does take longer, right? And again, as long as you find that you're moving forward, and you're able to function to some level of normalcy, especially after those first 2 weeks, and you're continuously progressing, yeah, you got to just trust your own nervous system to lead the way. But when you do recognize that, as I mentioned, there is some area or some emotion that you're constantly ruminating or you're constantly stuck with, there probably is something deeper, maybe a deeper trauma. Maybe, it's tied into something that, let's say, resurfaced, right? And it could be something about yourself, your own perception about what you thought you are, or how you thought you are, or what you thought about the world, or what you thought about the future, right? Like sometimes people have lots of expectations, dreams, plans they've made with that person in mind. And this is where the healthy process of, you know, grieving can be reset by seeking support. Okay. But if you're doing it on your own too, I'll quickly run through some of, like, I'll kind of broad strokes talk about the stages. So as you see yourself progress, maybe back and forth in those stages, you know that, okay, you're going along the right path. So shock or disbelief or denial is often the first stage. that, yeah, you can't believe they're not here. You might even sometimes find yourself or someone even talking to them. And it may be actually helpful to even maybe, write a letter to them in helping yourself process, not necessarily when you're in shock, but as you move forward. If you find that you're stuck, it may be helpful to connect with them in your own head to slowly let go. Oftentimes, as that happens, the next stage is the stage of the emotional surfacing. It bubbles up, right? And emotions are often like, a beach ball. You try to push them in, it bobs up more, right? So you don't really want to necessarily suppress them, but yes, you want to find a safe place where you can allow it to surface and you can allow yourself to go through it. And you're right, if you're surrounded um, by children, or you're in a space where you don't have that opportunity, yeah, it's important to seek out support, maybe a support group, maybe um, you know some kind of professional help where you can find that safe space where someone isn't judgmental. The healing or the healthy healing process is often thwarted or inhibited by well-meaning relatives or friends, but we've all had that experience that you are grieving and someone comes in and they need to process their own anxiety. So what do? They tell you about all their stories of all the ways or all the people that have passed, and that's not helpful either, right? And that can actually thwart that healing process. um, then the next stage, so in the stage of just the emotional surfacing, there can be all kinds of, there's going to be anger. People often say, you know oh, look at this person, they are still angry, or and it's often a way for our nervous system to release that pain. Like I said, this is actual physical pain. Some people feel the physical pain of it, but our brain pathways for pain are the same as the emotional pathways for pain. So you do need to find a way to help get that pain processed out. So again, to a certain extent, it's uh, definitely healthy to have anger, but you may be concerned about, again, people around you, or how do you express that anger in a healthy way that doesn't loop, okay? That you're not finding yourself ruminating or, burning yourself in that same thoughts of anger. Um, Again, as long as that river of emotions is flowing, it's natural. You might go from anger to sadness, and that's very common, right? So like you said, you have those phases of crying or sobbing, and then you oscillate to maybe you find some peace, because actually when we cry, there are certain natural, let's say, painkillers in our body that are released. That's the function of tears. So again, that has its own place. So every emotion has its own place as long as it keeps moving, and moving at the pace that is right for that person, it's still healthy. Um, Once you move forward from that, you might again find that there are, different ways that you try to maybe make amends. There may be different things that people do. You might even have conversations with God, or, some way of, you know, making things better. Sometimes people even have fantasies of, this person rising up again and coming back, or coming in, some other form. And that may be a cultural belief, right? And sometimes that's the way we hold on to that hope. And then there is also that feeling of loneliness and despair. And again, based on how much or how many people, like you said, how much family or supportive network you have, you feel that much deeper, right? But again, as long as that river is flowing, this is normal. And then when do you know that you are in a space of a healthy acceptance or a healthy healing is when you are able now to reflect back on the positive memories, on the beautiful um, journey that you may have had with this person, even if it's short bursts, right? Like it's not just that we grieve for someone near and dear, we might grieve for somebody we've known briefly, somebody we've met, a neighbor, even, right? And we do go through that process, and that's a beautiful part of being human, right? That's that ability to connect with that person and feel and live and feel the gratitude and the learnings and lessons and feel inspired even by their life. So that's when you know you've reached a space of acceptance. um, does that mean you'll never feel sadness? No. Healthy acceptance or healthy, the process of grieving, when it comes to a closure, you will still, maybe birthdays, you'll miss them, there'll be celebrations, maybe a little bit of sadness, um, a few tears, you know, the death anniversary, sometimes there are rituals around the anniversary times, um, but it will be also connected to the positive aspects. Nowadays there is, this term of celebration of life. So really about how do you celebrate someone's life. So going from mourning to what was really the message of their life, as short or as long as it has been. Every life has a purpose, every single life has a purpose, irrespective of how they departed or what circumstances caused it.
Yeah.
Every life has their purpose and their message. And if we can slowly, gently nudge our nervous system to keep moving forward, right? Looking after ourselves like we would a child, right? Being gentle, being caring, compassionate, and gently moving it along, hand holding ourselves, that inner child of ours, and reaching that space where we can celebrate and be inspired by their life.
Yeah.
Then that journey together has a deeper meaning, and your whole life orientation becomes that much more richer.
Yeah. Thank you. Like again, talking about people whom I have known who passed away. So many lives are just going. I'm noticing it more, or maybe people who are closer to me are going, leaving. So, as a spiritual being, how can we process this feeling and emotion of grief? I believe, personally, I believe that we are spiritual beings. Life is continuous. Somewhere it doesn't end. Where does it go? We don't know. Where it came from, we don't know. But then there is something. But how do we process that?
Yeah, and what you said is beautiful, right? Like, yes, we are spiritual beings having this human experience, this journey on earth. Uh, and irrespective, every culture, every religion has their own kind of theories, I guess, of what happens after. I have my personal beliefs, you have yours, and it's often informed by our experiences, with grief in the past and people who have passed. And, people have different experiences, but I see that more and more, with this generation especially, uh, they don't want to really believe in that. And that's okay too. And if what you believe is that you come from, the earth or the nature and you end there, even so, that life has a purpose, right? Um, There was a famous psychologist who actually defined life as the time you spend between the time you're born and the time you die, which is a very kind of technical, I guess, definition. But for those who don't believe in anything beyond, even so, you have to find that meaning and purpose. Because what brings our nervous system or our existence down, what keeps us in those hollows of despair, is that feeling of life being empty, that there is no meaning. And the truth is that there is meaning, and you can assign the meaning that is most empowering to you, because at the end of the day, it is your experience, right? And it is your relationship with that person who has passed that only you can know about. So I really go back to learning to trust yourself, right? Learning to trust that deep inner voice of wisdom. And, you know, yeah, if you believe there is life thereafter, you will experience it in that way, and that will empower you. If you believe there is no life hereafter, that it ends here, even so, that life journey of that person has had meaning. Even if the way they died seems meaningless or seems abrupt or seems to have no way of really finding reason or rationale. And we have terrible things happening in the world and people mourning and grieving with that. But even so, if you can find that meaning that comes from their life, if you can take the message of their life, and if you can integrate it into your own life, or if you can turn your wounds into wisdom and spread that to others, now you've given meaning not only to the life of the person who passed, but you've given meaning to yourself. And anybody, including us, would want that legacy of our life on this planet to continue. And that's the biggest tribute you can give to someone, and that's the biggest feeling of solace and peace you can bring to yourself. So, as a spiritual being, really connecting to that person's true self and connecting to our own inner voice of wisdom. And that will mean sometimes, yes, we need to quieten this voice of doubt, this voice of anger, this voice, and that comes through various strategies. What you talked about, meditation, mindfulness, there are a range of prayers. Um, those are good strategies too. For someone, it might be journaling. For someone, it might be planting a tree in their name. For somebody, it might just be honoring them as they go to bed. So you have to find your way of taking or finding that meaning and slowly letting go of that attachment that we have to that physical form, right? It will never be replaced as someone, when we are grieving, when you talk to somebody. Yeah, even if you know that or you believe there is life beyond, you still want the person in that physical form. That's how you've known them, right? But that's the piece that, as a spiritual being, we need to let go. That this is a form we have known. And even though we cannot physically feel them or touch them, and there is no cell phone connection, perhaps, right? Um, we don't know how to communicate with them. Trust your nervous system, trust your own belief system, as long as it empowers you to move forward and honor their memory. by taking that purpose and meaning that they left behind. And that gives us the strength and peace to keep moving forward in our life.
So supposing like, if I just thinking about helping another, supporting somebody else who is grieving, their loss in a healthy manner, how can we support? Like, I am not a professional. I am definitely aging. I have my own experience with grief. But what would you suggest that how do we support people?
Excellent question. And, I think many people actually struggle with this, right? You often find that when you express somebody has passed, there's almost kind of this icy silence, like there's an awkward silence. People don't know what to say, right? They don't know how to react. And sometimes people mumble kind of, what is standard? Oh, sorry for your loss, deepest condolences. And it doesn't touch the person at all, right? Um, I have a nice little acronym that I use for how to help someone. So using the HELP. So H stands for holding the space. And what that really means is that if you're going in with that intention to support somebody else, and it could be even when you're grieving, or it could be, someone's grief or loss that you don't feel because you didn't know the person, but you want to support that person in their time of distress. How do you hold the space for them? So holding the space essentially means that you create this bubble of non-judgmental acceptance, of safety, creating a safe space for them to express their grief in the way that is most natural and meaningful for their own nervous system. What that means for us is that we don't react and judge. I know easier said than done, but sometimes just remembering to remember that I'm here for this person and this person is not me. And the only way they can be helped is by going through what is right for their nervous system and trusting that their nervous system knows their way, right? Um, and holding that space just means being present, being able to allow them to express without necessarily going to quieten them or stop them or stifle them because it makes us uncomfortable. Acknowledging to yourself that maybe some of those reactions may be uncomfortable. Some people get uncomfortable when someone is not crying, for example, right? Like, hey, why are you not crying? And they'll try to provoke them to cry, or they'll try to get them to talk, or, that's all in your head. Again, yeah, if that person is stuck in a period of time, professional support is helpful because you don't know what lies beneath the surface. And if the nervous system is keeping that lid on tight, maybe it's because there is too much there to handle, right? And if you pull out that lid, you might not know how to handle it for them. So the H is always about holding the space. And what is the space? It's a space where you can let them feel safe. And how do you make them feel safe? By not judging, by just letting them take the lead in what they need for their own healing. The E stands for empathy. So expressing empathy, often people don't know what to say because they're in their own head. And fair, it might take you some time, and it's okay to express yourself authentically that, right now I'm in shock. I just don't know what to say. That's fair. But once you're able to stabilize that and be in that person's world, right? And it's not as difficult sometimes as people say. I don't know what goes on in their head. You don't need to know. once you quieten all the noises in your head, all those anxieties and fears, you trust their nervous system to lead them and you, then you are in their world, right? So empathy is really huge, being able to see the world through that person's eyes, right? And understanding, or just being able to acknowledge, even validate their fears. You don't need to necessarily change it, because their nervous system can do it for the most part, right? The L stands for listen. The best gift you can give somebody in today's world, where we're all so busy, is that time and space to authentically listen. Again, we're not in that physical village where we could sit with somebody. Listening doesn't sometimes even have to be listening to someone's words, right? Just sitting there in that space. Their eyes speak, their body language speaks, your eyes speak, your body language speaks. In fact, 70% of what transpires is nonverbal, right? And that's why when someone says the right words, but you don't feel it in their nonverbal language, it doesn't touch you. Or same thing, if you do that, it doesn't touch them. And finally, P. So P is really about being present in that moment, being present to, yeah, what is really true in this moment. And the more you anchor yourself and them, because obviously when someone is in grief, there is a tendency to oscillate between the past and the future, and you let them do that, and then gently, slowly bring them back to the present, and what is really so in the present. Again, in the olden days, the physical presence could do a lot, but today, with the technology that we have, we can still be present for someone and bring them back to the here and now by, even if you're virtual, we can help them kind of get them back to the present. So ensuring that, yeah, what are they thinking now? What are they feeling now in this moment? What are some things in this moment that are helpful to them? And, a good kind of uh, question, or good kind of way to express that is asking them, how can I be supportive to you? So that is really, really important. And yeah, sometimes that's all that's needed. And of course, if you see that someone is stuck, again, bringing them to the present of what they need today may be some professional support, right? People often say, oh, grief is so natural, and, how can somebody else know what I'm going through? And again, there is some value in that, but a professional can often help to create this HELP environment.
Yeah. So, yeah, thank you. It's a great reflection, help. Yeah. And so again, how does one keep oneself centered and be prepared? Life is, one person is born, and we know next thing is that one goes away as well. Birth and if somebody is born, then like night and day, death is already there somewhere, when we do not know. So, how can we overcome that fear, or help somebody overcome the fear that, we are aware of somebody is sick or something is happening and we might lose? How to overcome, how to have that grip over oneself and hold on, keep ourselves centered.
Yeah, excellent question, because now you're talking about the here and now, right? Like, how do I really support the living, right? And support myself through those anxieties. And again, having those anxieties, especially in the aftermath of something passing, it just brings or makes it so real that we are finite. And again, it might urge us to live every moment to the fullest, right? So, having that anxiety around someone passing or, a near or dear one, especially if people are, let's say, transitioning into the golden period of their life, is often is often natural. And it may even make us feel like, yeah, what about us? That means we're finite too. And in a positive sense, we can take it to say that how can I live each moment to the fullest? How can I sleep each day fulfilled? And if I didn't sleep fulfilled, how can I let go of that and look for something the next day that will bring that sense of fulfillment and meaning and purpose into my life? I actually give a lot of my clients something called the daily vitamins. So the daily vitamins is something that, before you go to bed at night, and maybe just as you're waking up, that time between when you're fully awake and falling asleep, or, waking up and fully awake, that's a hypnagogic state. And that's a time that the deep recesses of your mind are very, very receptive, right? And that's a good time when you start or end your day to really take some of these daily vitamins that help you kind of stay with the present of what is happening today. So the four vitamins, I call them the vitamin K, L, M, and P. So, what are these vitamins? K, kindness. So, where did you be kind to someone and where did you receive kindness from someone in the day? And I will guarantee you that you would have received kindness from someone. It could be, someone far away. It could be someone you're walking on the street. It could be, the janitor smiled at you, takes your garbage. Someone has been kind to you, and you've been kind to someone today. The L is laughter. Where did, you laugh a little bit today, or you made somebody else laugh a little bit today? You brought joy into their life. The vitamin M is mastery. That where did I do something a little better than I did yesterday? Where did I touch someone's life, maybe, or I improved my own life in a little way? And the vitamin P is where did I enjoy that moment of pleasure or bliss? Whether it was during the meditation, whether it was reading a book, whether it was, meeting a friend, whether it was doing my job, and just that deep sense of, satisfaction and pleasure and fulfillment, um, as I'm feeling when I'm doing this podcast, right? Like knowing that someone out there is hearing this and this could make a difference to their life. And where did someone give you pleasure, right? Where did your near and dear one, even if that day you had, let's say, um, some argument or a little, difference of opinions, or they're far away, or you heard some, difficult news, you still can find that one moment of pleasure. And it's important to give ourselves permission to feel that even while we are in the grieving process. Because if you think about it, what is that the person who passed would have wanted the most for you? And the answer is always that they would have wanted me to be my best self, a happier self, that they would have wanted that in some way that I made a difference to somebody else, right? And as you get present to that, you will notice that this anxiety starts melting away. That what we can do, what is within our circle of control, is not, how many days we're here. What is within our circle of control is how well we live it, how much we are in sync with ourselves, how much we move towards that sense of inner peace, and how we can quieten sometimes that chatter around our heads, right? To really be in sync with that which makes us feel joyful and happy. And how do we pass that on to people that we care about, and people we know? How can we lighten up somebody else's day? You will never know when you're walking down the street, the smile you gave somebody could actually be their moment of pleasure for that day, right? And that's really how we overcome that feeling of anxiety. You cannot battle with this. You cannot be logical and rational, because it isn't logical and rational. And so all our cognitive, our intelligence cannot shift that anxiety. Sure, law of probability, we can talk about all that, but at the core of it, you cannot fight anxiety merely, especially, death anxiety, by logic or rational. What you can do, though, is become present, shine that light on the beautiful things of this moment, the things that enrich our life, and continue to enrich the life every day of those that are close to us, right? So, yeah, if you've been waiting to call that family member or that friend and you've been putting it off, yeah, why not? If you can't call them, send a text thinking of you. You're a wonderful person. What you bring to our lives is very meaningful. Your kindness is appreciated, right? This is effortless, and it's a habit. And that's why I often say the daily vitamins is something you take on a daily basis so that it becomes a part of who you are. And as it becomes a part of who you are, your nervous system, instead of looking for threats in the environment as it's geared to do, and stimulating, triggering anxiety by all the things that can go wrong, it will naturally focus on all the things to be grateful for, all the things that are joyous, all the things that make this world so beautiful. And it's all there for you. Look out the window. The sun shines for you. The sun shines for your loved one. And that's the real meaning of this life journey, is to enjoy this playground of life. And then when it is time for us to move or leave this playground, we've done our part in bringing joy to ourselves and others.
Yeah, yeah. Thank you. It was very, very deep and very intensive talk. I will definitely listen to it 2, 3 times to absorb, really absorb what you have shared. And the last section about taking the vitamins on a daily dose, it's so important. We help ourselves, we support others. It's making a healthier environment, creating, good vibrations in the environment that is there. So once again, I really want to thank you. And again, I'll remember that. In fact, I will put it in the notes as well, that help also is very important. To really hold the space for a person and be present. These starting and ending both. It's very, very helpful to me at least at this moment of time. Thank you so much. And we look forward to sometime whenever you have time again, we have another session with you on mental health and, keeping ourselves well and fit. Yeah.
And thank you, Kamal, for what you do, your authentic sharing, your willingness to be vulnerable, to talk about topics that are deep, that are meaningful, and really just, bringing your presence to this platform. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. We'll see you again.